Be Frankie.
Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix.
Yo, what's good? It's your boy B-Dell. If you're new to this channel, hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. But today we're going to be breaking down the dynamics of the Luciferian Great Reset that's going to be orchestrated by a big event that's connected to the Trojan horse conspiracy. And my logical assertions is going to be based on classified governmental documents, occultic knowledge, and the Vedic Gematria Codex. Now, when you understand the apparatus of the socio-political aspect of civics, there's an extrapolation of events that must take place to create this Great Reset, right? We're going to get into it. So first, the whole personification of the Luciferian Great Reset is based on the baking and the food systems are basically going to have a implication. It's going to have a collapse, which will create a form of destabilization on the planet, which is uncontrolled chaos and the rise of the so-called Antichrist under a false system, right? So the rider of the white horse of Revelation 6 is also the symbology of the Trojan horse, right? As I'm showing you right here. Meaning that this system, in order to orchestrate a big event, a false flag event, which is also a black swan event, everything is going to start with the whole concept of infiltration, the infiltration from the inside out that is going to be amplified from the deep state shadow government, right? So now, this is the main reason why Donald Trump back in 2020, he signed the National Emergency Declaration, which gave full validity to the FEMA Response Coordination Center, right? Meaning that FEMA is also connected to the United Nations. So what Donald Trump did, like I said, it creates, hold on for a second. Donald Trump approves the emergency declaration for the District of Columbia, right? So what does that essentially mean? That means that FEMA is basically a authorized to identify, mobilize, to provide discretion, equipment, resources necessary to alleviate the impacts of the emergency, right? So why did he sign that? Because he knows that during this Great Awakening period, there's going to be an extrapolation of events that's going to be taking place that's going to basically destabilize and neutralize humanity, right? Whether you're talking about false flag events, weather modification, frequency modification, the altering of your DNA, when you're talking about genetically modified foods and things of that nature, there's going to be a multitude of things in order to orchestrate what's going to be taking place here soon, right? So the National Emergencies Act basically authorized the president to declare a national emergency without a specific request from the state. Such as declarations do not provide any specific emergency authority, instead to rely on emergency authorities provided in other statutes. Because one thing you got to understand is that everything that's connected to the de facto corporation, an ordinance, a policy, or statute, that is not basically natural law. That is connected to a demonstrative government, right? So that's why they signed those acts and everything. So Donald Trump, you know, with that being said, he is not your so-called he's not going to be the one to so-called save the system and get the great majority of humanity from under the deep state shadow government, which is basically comprised of the Democrats. He, you know what I'm saying, he is not the savior of this whole system because he signed that national emergency declaration, which gave full validity to FEMA, which is connected to the United Nations, right? So the United Nations, that is basically the foundation of your so-called New World Order system. After you have a Luciferian Great Reset, so FEMA camps in America for the unprepared, because a lot of people are not, they're basically not prepared for what is going to be taking place. They're not prepared because they still under the sleep spell. They still under the sleep spell of a so-called everything is conspiracy. I believe what these politicians are going to say. Because one thing you got to understand is that, mass indoctrination started with academic fraud. So one thing you got to understand is that, hold on for a second. Now, the House of Intelligence Committee Chairman Turner's statement on a serious national security threat. Why is that, right? There's a national security threat because there's going to be infiltration that's going to be taking place. I'm going to play this video.
A national security threat that the House Intelligence Chairman sent a cryptic warning about. NBC National Security and Global Affairs reporter Dan DeLuce has been digging into it. What have you learned, Dan?
That's right. So sources are telling NBC News that Congressman Turner is referring to a foreign military capability, and that foreign military is the Russian military.
National security situation that Rick Turner had publicized this morning.
I do have a statement, and I'm going to be very precise, and I'm not going to take questions. But last month, I sent a letter to the White House requesting a meeting with the president to discuss a serious national security issue that is classified. In response to that letter, a meeting is now scheduled tomorrow on this matter here at the Capitol with a gang of four and with the president's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan. I will press the administration to take appropriate action. Everybody can be comforted by that. I saw Chairman Turner's statement on the issue, and I want to assure the American people there's no need for public alarm.
One thing you got to understand is that when they tell you not to panic, be very meticulous and pay attention to everything all around you, because that's how they neutralize you. That's everything is based on everything that's connected to the Luciferian Great Reset is based on destabilization and neutralization. So where they neutralize you so much to the point where you're not able to be self-sufficient enough to have the resources to combat the afflictions that's going to be propagated by the deep state shadow government when you're talking about these false flag events and these national security threats. So pay very attention to when they tell you that.
Be comforted by that. I saw Chairman Turner's statement on the issue, and I want to assure the American people there's no need for public alarm. We are going to work together to address this matter, as we do all sensitive matters that are classified. And beyond that, I'm not at liberty to disclose classified information and really can't say much more. But we just want to assure everyone, steady hands are at the wheel. We'll work.
Now, like I said, they know there's going to be a lot of false flag events that's going to be taking place. So be very meticulous of all your surroundings, because like I said, the Trojan horse aspect is based on the symbology that you're going to be infiltrated from the inside out, right? You're going to be, so that national terror threat, that national security threat is based on infiltration. So it's not a coincidence, since we're talking about infiltration, there's not a coincidence that the United States flag on top of the Senate of the United States Capitol flies upside down, because when a flag is flying upside down, that is basically signifying distress and basically an extreme danger of property and an extreme danger of a so-called national threat, a national security threat to the geographical landmass of America. So you have to pay attention to everything all around you when you're talking about signs and symbols, right? So an upside down flag is a flag code that basically is signifying and is basically the symbology of civil distress, right? Or civil unrest, right? Why is that? Because it's the breaking of the false flag alert. So this is why, when you're talking about Planet Nibiru, when you're talking about Planet X, there's a multitude of things in order to create the omissions and create many different black swan events to hide the fact that we're going through a magnetic pole shift, to hide the fact that we're going through a great reset, to hide the fact that we have planet Nibiru or planet X in our atmosphere, right? So with that being said, you know, they got to create false flag events, right? And a lot of those false flag events is going to be talking about a Iran nuclear strike, alien invasion, immigration invasion, which is active right now, United Nations troops, because the United Nations military factions work in conjunction to all militarized groups on the planet, which is why you have the borders are opening in. The expansion of borders is to let these United Nations military factions in into where you have a terror threat on American soil, basically. So you have the mass shootings that's going to be taking place. Then you got the stadium arena explosives. Then you got concert attacks, weather and HARP, which is weather modification, cyber attack, chemical attack. So they need a false flag. They need a big event. They need an orchestrated event in order to implement this Luciferian Great Reset, right? Now, one thing you got to understand is that, you know, you have to understand the multitude on how to have some type of self-preservation when they have these false flag events, right? So you have to understand the expansion of energy. You have to understand what to do when you have a water shortage or food shortage, when you're talking about needing shelter, when you need security and protection. There's a multitude of things that you need to combat what's going to be taking place, because it's not a coincidence that there's going to be false flag events that's going to be orchestrating everything as far as the Great Awakening period. So the great sign and the revealing of the Messiah, the Son of Man. So you're going to have civil unrest, right? You're going to have power outages, electricity, grid modification. Then you're going to have the collapse and the crash of a economic system, because I told you the Federal Reserve System is a deep state economic system, right? Because it's connected to fraud. Anything that's acclimated to fraud is not conducive to the matriarchal order of the sun cycle, right? In the golden age. So then this is where they're going to try to implement a new digital currency system, because I told you the Federal Reserve, they got bought up by the Treasury. So since they got bought up by the Treasury because they found Chapter 11, now this is where they implement the new digital currency system that is connected to the BRICS. Then you have the food shortage. Then you're going to have the implications in this in the catastrophic side effects of the draconian juice. Then you got the FEMA prisons, right? The FEMA camps, which is connected to that national emergency declaration that Donald Trump signed. Then you're going to have martial law, because when you activate martial law, you activate FEMA, right? So it's also going to be a civil war on American soil. But before you have a world war, it's going to be a civil war, which is why they're coming out with the movie on 8/24, I believe, of this year. On 8/24. Now I just got a download. I'm gonna come back to this civil war, because the movie, when it comes out, I think it's April 8th. I think it's April 24th or something like that. I believe so. So the judgment of events in America. So like I said, it's inevitable that you're going to have a stock market crash, because the World Economic Forum, they said it's inevitable that the electrical grid system is going to shut down. Then you're going to have the devaluation of paper money to implement a new digital currency system. So all this stuff has to take place, right? All this stuff has to take place. So everything as far as like the Civil War and civil unrest is basically the combativeness of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, right? Or Democratic states versus Republican states. That's what is going to be taking place, right? So this is where you're going to have the entire geographical landmass of America broken up into several countries, right? And that's when you're going to have the afflictions of the catastrophic events that's going to be taking place when you talk about weather modification, when you have the seismic zones and activities, everything, all these events have to take place in order to implement the Luciferian Great Reset, right? All these things are big events, right? Now, I need you to understand something. When you have all these events taking place, that is basically going to activate a form of anarchy. What is anarchy? Anarchy is an absence of government, a state of lawlessness or political disorder due to the absence of governmental authority, right? And it's basically comprised of a utopian society of individuals who love complete freedom without the government, right? So it's going to create order out of chaos, right? Which is a Freemasonic principle. So anarchy is also the symbology and the personification of the symbol of the Antichrist, as I was talking about in the last video, right? So it's not a coincidence that, anarchy, once you have the solar eclipse on April 8th, 2024, right? It's not a coincidence that anarchy, when you go to the Hebrew gematria code for it, it says 824. 824 is a gematria code for anarchy in the United States, right? So because April 8th, 2024, you get 824, right? Which is also esoterically connected to the prophetic divinations that's going to be taking place. So all this is activated by way of prophecy because the energy extraction matrix and simulation is connected to the Great Reset. So there's many different things that's connected to the system when you're talking about the Gematria Codex, right? So it's not a coincidence that the solar eclipse, when you look at the numerology aspect of it, 8/2024, or when you just look at 8/24, 8/24 is anarchy in Hebrew gematria, which is equated to the numerological code of 666, right? So all these things is going to be activating anarchy, right? So it's not a coincidence that the solar eclipse looks just like the Antichrist sigil, because one thing you got to understand is that symbolism in itself has a double meaning. Just like you have many different words, they have multiple meanings. Just because you see one symbol doesn't mean it doesn't have a multifaceted context to it, right? It has hidden meanings to it. You have an esoteric meaning and you have an exoteric meaning. So the esoteric meaning is the symbology of the Antichrist. The exoteric is talking about anarchy. So somebody was telling me, so no, that's the anarchy symbol. Just like you have words that have double meanings, you have symbolism that have double meanings. You know what I'm saying? You got to stop being a mental savant in order to understand what's taking place. Otherwise, like I said, you're going to be tricked by the technology that's going to be amplified by the oligarchs, because spirituality is all about being tricked. Spirituality has nothing to do with just because you wear damn crystals and hair wraps and you pray and you meditate. That has nothing to do with spirituality. Spirituality is based on the fact that you're able to decipher and decode what's taking place that's going to be amplified by the oligarchs, right? So like I said, that's what's taking place. So with that being said, it's not a coincidence that the Antichrist symbol, like I showed you in the last video, is connected to the anarchy symbol, because anarchy is going to be activated when you activate civil unrest, when you have martial law activated, the grid going down, you have a dollar collapse, you have many different catastrophic events, geomagnetic weather modification, frequency modification, all these things are going to be taking place, which will create anarchy. Civil war, food shortage, that creates anarchy, right? So there's not a coincidence that the anarchy symbol and the Antichrist symbol is sitting right over the geographical landmass of America, right? And when you go to the Hebrew gematria code of anarchy, 824, which is connected to 8/2024, April 8th, 2024, the solar eclipse, right? So all this stuff is esoterically connected because it's prophetic divination, right? Everything must happen in divine order, right? So that's what makes you chosen, being able to decipher the bullshit that's going to be implemented by these oligarchs, right? When you're talking about the deep state shadow government. So let's get into some videos to give you some clarity about everything that's taking place, to give you a little bit of clarity. So the anarchy, what's going to be taking place? You got to understand what's going on when you're talking about anarchy. Because like I said, the whole symbology of the Trojan horse conspiracy is the white horse of Revelations chapter 6. You're going to be infiltrated from the inside that is going to be amplified from the deep state shadow government. I'm going to play the video.
A full-time 24-hour-a-day cyber security, not part-time. Every department has their own. We don't communicate with anybody. If we're going to be attacked, which we're getting every day, I assume everybody is. I'm asking that these 2 state reps introduce legislation that we have one cybersecurity czar that's full-time, nonstop, 24 hours a day. They're attacking us all. Third, very important, I'm asking that legislation be introduced like in Texas, that if you're pulled over or stopped in the state of Ohio, that there be legislation, the law changed, that you can be charged with a state felony charge of being here illegally, and you can be arrested and charged. Those 3 things. Now, I come to you not to alarm you, but to arm you. I want you to know what's going on. None of this I've made up. This is being told to us. And the reason it's being told to us, because 9/11, they knew it was coming. And none of us knew. No communications with law.
I need you to understand something. So he's basically alluding to the fact that something is going to be taking place that's equivalent to 9/11. And this next event is going to be bigger than 9/11. In my opinion, I think it's going to be to where you have these sleeper cells that are going to be activated. These sleeper cells, due to the expansion of all the borders, this is when you have all these United Nations military factions coming in, these militarized groups to overthrow America, which is going to create a form of chaos and order in a form of anarchy, right? So it's not a coincidence that the great majority of these sheriffs, and they coming out speaking, they talking about the American people have to basically arm themselves in order to combat the affliction that's going to be taking place on American soil. I'm going to keep playing the video.
Law enforcement. We can't do anything with drones. We have drones, but we're going to. And we're going to do everything we can to protect our community, to keep our live squads, our fire, our dispatching. If you've ever lost your phone or your battery goes dead, everybody freaks out. Imagine if you can't use your cell phone. Now, again, they're getting into our cyber, and that's what our country, you can't pump gas without electricity. You can't pump water without electricity. So they're doing this to us. These are the 3 things that I'm going to ask these state representatives. I've been in communication with them. You can reach out to them. They'll be waiting for the conversation. And this is just the beginning. And again, I've instructed my IT people to start looking at ways that we can detect drones and what we can do to stop drones. I don't know if there is any technology. Our government doesn't even have enough. Now, I will take questions at this point. Any questions you got? Yes, sir.
Good morning, Sheriff Jones.
Yes, sir.
It's an honor to be in your presence today. If given the opportunity to talk to the president through your organization, the Sheriff's Association, what are some of the things you would like to talk to him about?
The question was, what would I talk to the president to meet with him? I would ask him to please close our borders, help us out. It's not, they're not staying in these border states where they're coming across. They're coming in. Every state is a border state. Please help us stop the Chinese from bringing this fentanyl through our border and stop all these cyber attacks. They're attacking us all. And we have nothing. We don't have any technology to stop it. We're on the defense. The FBI director said for every one person we have in our government, I'm going to repeat that, every one person we have in our government that deals in cyber, the Chinese have 50 to 1. And I don't know what we're doing. I assume we're just on the defense. Please help us. It starts with the border. We've got to have our border secure.
So like I said, the expansion of borders due to the Democratic Party, which is also connected to the deep state shadow government, right? You're going to be infiltrated from the outside, inside out. And this video also proves what I'm saying.
Say you should be packing heat.
Fox 35's Brian Scott is here now with more on this bold suggestion. Right?
Yeah, 3 sheriffs in the area are now standing together on this one, saying terrorists, active shooter, whatever the situation, they want citizens ready to step up.
If you're not afraid of a gun, get one.
The message from Polk County's top cop, crystal clear.
Become proficient, get a concealed firearms license and carry it. And if you need to shoot somebody, shoot them a lot.
Sheriff Grady Judd's going
You know what I'm saying?
public.
This is where you have to use your mental and your spiritual fortitude and discernment. Like, why are they saying that? Right? Because by way of chaos magic meaning that they have to give you the truth. They got to tell you these things, right? Because subconsciously we give them consent when they come on, on media and when they put it out in the public domain. So it's not a coincidence that all this stuff is going to be taking place. And in my opinion, I think it's going to start around March 25th, right? So I'm gonna keep playing this video because, like I said, all this stuff is important. You got to pay attention all around you. Like I said, spirituality is about not being tricked. That's what it's about. So pay attention to your surroundings when you're at work, grocery shopping, or whatever, because, like I said, you're going to be infiltrated from the inside.
Period. And if you need to shoot somebody, shoot them a lot.
Sheriff Grady Judd's going public today with a response to attacks around the world and here at home, telling citizens they need to step up.
The armed assailant doesn't plan on you fighting back. He plans on having a gun, doing all the shooting, and you're just the sitting duck where the ducks need to shoot back.
And if not a gun, something to defend yourself and those around you. A bold stance.
Be prepared to serve as the first line of defense.
Very similar to the one Brevard Sheriff Wayne Ivey went viral with 2 weeks ago. That video now up to nearly 500,000 views.
No matter who you are, what your position is on guns, there's no denying the fact that the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun or a knife is an armed and well-prepared citizen or law enforcement officer.
And tonight, Volusia County Sheriff Mike Chitwood is also stepping up. He tells me he backs Judd and Ivey on this one completely, adding, there's not enough police in America to stop all of these threats. Just one citizen stepping up, he says, could make the difference.
So the stance clearly popular among those local law enforcement. On social media, though, the reaction's a bit more mixed. Some praising the message, others saying it's not helping, even some saying it creates panic. Live in the studio, Brian Scott, Fox 35 News.
Enforcement leaders say
it's going to kind of be like that movie Red Dawn. If you've never seen the movie Red Dawn, they have a modern day version and they have an older version. So it's imperative. That's the homework for everybody to watch those two movies. Watch the older version and watch the newer version. And it's basically showing you, I think in one of the movies, it's showing you Russian militarized groups infiltrating American soil that was brought in by the deep state shadow government. And then you have one that was where China infiltrated American soil that was brought in by the deep state shadow government. So there's going to be an invasion process going to be taking place. That's going to be the big event. That's why you got all these sleeper cells. They all over the planet. All they got to do is get that phone call and you working with one of them. And you know what I'm saying? One of them disappeared and they come out and they just, start picking people off. You know what I'm saying? That's what's going to be the next big event, right? And that's what's going to be the precursor to your so-called civil war, because people are not going to understand the dichotomy between those who are working with the government and those who are who basically created their own militarized groups that goes against the government. So it's going to be hard to pick sides, right? So let me see something here. So like I said, all that stuff is going to be connected to anarchy, right? All this stuff is connected to anarchy. And like I said, in my opinion, it tells you that, this Luciferian system, this Babylonian beast system, right? This draconian system has a short time period, according to Revelations 12:12. So around the time of March 25th, that's when they're going to amplify all these orchestrated events, as I was talking about in the beginning of the video, right? So one thing you got to understand is that the great majority of all these false flag events, the great majority, when you're talking about the Federal Reserve System having a problem with the economic system, when you're talking about the activation of the draconian juice that they did back in 2020, all this stuff happened in March. So this is the precursor to part 2 that's going to be taking place, right? Whether you're talking about currency revaluation or an economic crash or an invasion, All this stuff has to take place, but the great majority of it starts in the month of March. So be very meticulous of your surroundings as we go into the month of March in the next few weeks or so, right? So like I said, all this stuff is connected to the deep state shadow government, right? So now you got to understand something. The shadow government. What is the shadow government? Hold on. Matter of fact, let me get this book for a second real quick. I'm going to get this book. Now, you got to get this book right here. I read this book like 4 times, like 4 years ago, something like that. I got this book like 5 years ago. It's called The Deep State, Donald Trump, the FBI, and the Rule of Law, right? You got to get this book. I bought this book like 5 years ago. I did some very extensive research in order to understand the whole mechanisms of the deep state shadow government and what they do. So the deep state is basically comprised of the Federal Reserve System, the IMF, the World Bank, the intelligence contractors, defense contractors, the MIC, MICC, the MIC lobbyists, the Council on Foreign Relations when you talk about the trilateral group. Then you have the Wall Street offshore accounts. And then you have the Treasury, because I told you the Federal Reserve got bought out by the Treasury, right? Now this is when they're trying to implement BRICS, where you have the United Nations. So all this stuff is basically the whole foundation of the deep state shadow government. Now, what is the deep state connected to? Now, the exoteric, the commercialized version of the deep state shadow government is democracy. Now, what is democracy? They now have discovered that democracy, or democracy, short for the word democracy, when you look at the suffix of the word crossy, it means Kratos, which is the god of Saturn. So this system is comprised of the fallen ones because Saturn is a fallen planet. But that's why the great majority of people who run this country, right, or the people who run the world in the simulation in itself are basically the fallen ones, right? So all demons and rogues gather together somehow to collect votes and occupy the seat in the business, to plunder. So like I said, it's all based on infiltration because there's no such thing as a democracy. As I told you, when you was a little kid and when you learn how to say the Pledge of Allegiance, I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the Republic. It does not say to the democracy because democracy in itself was the exoteric version or the microcosmic version of the deep state shadow government. That's how they infiltrated everything, right? They are the ones who created the multitude of the Babylonian beast system. That's what democracy is. Democracy is basically a watered down version of ancient Babylon, right? So this is all connected to the dark forces of evil, which is connected to the pyramid of evil of the third dimension to the lower fourth dimension, which is the demiurge, comprised of the draconic reptilian, the draconian reptilian, the hybrids of the Philistines and the Canaanites, the dark priesthood of the Vatican Church. These are basically comprised of the evil forces that control this whole deep state shadow government, right? So in order to understand everything, you know what I'm saying, you got to understand what the deep state is. So I'm going to be showing you this video. Now, first, I need to show you something else because we were talking about Democrats. Because I need you to understand something. Democracy in itself, which is amplified by the deep state shadow government, right? You got to read this book right here by Dr. York called 666 Leviathan, the Beast as the Antichrist, right? So it's not a coincidence that you see Dr. York wrote this book back in the early 90s. So when you look at this picture, the illustration of it, at the bottom, who does that look like right there? That looks like Donald Trump, right? So that means that he's seen something, right? So it's not a coincidence, as he's talking about the beast Leviathan as the Antichrist, he has all those, the plutocracy and the oligarchs on the front of the cover, which is your personification of the beast. Why he has the leopard, because the leopard is the symbology of leprosy, because that's connected to the Canaanite bloodline, right? Those are the ones who made it with the daughters of men when you're talking about the Draconians. The fallen ones, the Nephilim, when they came down. So the Nephilim gave the power to the beast, the Canaanite, which created democracy, which created the deep state shadow government, right? So this is why under the deep state shadow government, you have a multitude of secret societies, right? Which is the esoteric version of democracy. So you got the Brotherhood of the Snake, the Brotherhood of the Dragon, then you got the Knights of the KKK, because the KKK is a democratic organization, which is also a Christian organization, right? So then that's connected to the 1724 Black Christian codes, because when you go to the G3526 Strong Concordance, the word Christian translates to the word Black, which takes you out of your sovereign capacity. So everything that's based on the deep state shadow government and democracy, right, is all based on fraud. Then you have the order of the Luciferians, the Satanic Order, the Open Friendly Secret Society, which is connected to the Vatican. Then you have the Nazi Party, SS. Then you have the Jason Society, the Illuminati, the Bavarian Illuminati, the Secret Eight, the Secrets of Ages, the Guardians, the Millennium, the Skull and Bone Society. Then you have the Demolay Society, the Order of the Quest, the Jesuits. Then you have the Rosicrucians. Then you have the Ashtar Order, which is basically the humanoid version of Ashtar Command. Then you have the Scroll and the Key. Then you have the Odd Fellows. Then you have the Order of Zion. And then you have the Least Serpent Rogue, which is the Red Serpent, which is the personification of the dragon. And it's not a coincidence that 2024 is the year of the Red Dragon. So with all that being said, all these are basically Christianized secret societies, right? Which is also not a coincidence that pastors, bishops, reverends, deacons, politicians are all connected to these orders. My nose is itching. So with that being said, that's not a coincidence, right? It's not a coincidence when you're talking about, in order for, you got to analyze something. When you're talking about border expansions and stuff, like I said, everything is going to be started with the whole infiltration. The infiltration happens when the deep state shadow government, democracy in itself, is connected to the executive branch, meaning that the executive branch basically overrides the judicial and the legislative branch, which is why the great majority of all these political leaders who are connected to the Democratic Party, they always sign executive orders, right? Because the deep state the deep state shadow government is the one who controls the executive branch, right? Which is connected to fraud. So with that being said, this is why they activate the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is FEMA. So they sign all these executive orders. They sign Executive Order 10995, provides for the takeover for the communication media, right? Because we all know that the great majority of the media that pushes out misinformation is being controlled by the Canaanite, right? Which is your symbology of the Jebusites, which is connected to the 11 seeds of Canaan, the cursed seed, right? Which is comprised of your deep state shadow government. Then you have the Executive Order 10997 provides for the takeover of electricity, power, petroleum, gas, fuels, and minerals and resources. Executive Order 10988 provides for the takeover of food and resources, right? Then you have Executive Order 10999 provides for the takeover of all modes of transportation, control of highways and seaports. And then you have Executive Order 11,000, which provides for the mobilizations of all civilians into work buyer trades under the government supervision. So it's not a coincidence that all this stuff is connected to the concept of destabilization after you have a false flag event. Because as I told you, right, in order to create these events, you got to have a form of destabilization that's going to create anarchy, right? Civil unrest. So like I said, the executive branch is being controlled by the deep state shadow government under democracy and liberalism, right? So this is where they create executive orders to create martial law, to create a collapse, a crash, an economic crash, food shortages, digital currency system that's connected to FEMA, which is also connected to the United Nations under the BRICS nation. So with that being said, all this stuff is a form of anarchy, right? It's not a coincidence. All this stuff is not a coincidence because all this stuff is being infiltrated by the deep state shadow government, right? Now, I'm going to show you another video. Because like I said, the infiltration in itself, matter of fact, I'm going to show you this slide for a second. Because everything, you know what I'm saying, when you understand chaos magic through the symbology of imagery or whatever, because art imitates reality. So when you're talking about the Luciferian Great Reset, the banking and the food systems are basically collapsing to where you have uncontrolled chaos and order for a new world order, right? So with that being said, the rider of the white horse of the book of Revelation 6 is actually the personification of the Trojan horse. The white horse of Revelation is the Trojan horse. And the white horse is being controlled by the white hats. The white hats is the symbology of the deep state shadow government, meaning that the infiltration in itself is going to be orchestrated by the Democratic Party, which is why they're going to show you this commercial. I'm going to play the video.
Left us a gift.
You see the Trojan horse, right?
This left us a gift. That is so nice of them. I think we misjudged them. I love horses. Me too. We should open the gate. Hang on. Let's see what Charlotte thinks. Charlotte!
At CrowdStrike, we monitored millions of cyber events to detect threats and prevent breaches before they happen, to keep your business from...
Notice she said cyber threat. They said cyber threat because they know that we're going to be infiltrated from the inside out. These are the sleeper cells that's coming in. These are the ones, when you're talking about the expansion of borders, that is being implemented by the Democratic Party when they signed those executive orders to basically bend the law under draconian law, right? So this is why you have, you know, cyber attacks and things of that nature. When you talk about the talking of a civil war, it's all being activated because you're being infiltrated from the inside, which is also connected to the symbology of the Trojan horse. The Trojan horse is the white horse of the book of Revelation 6.
Hang on. Let's see what Charlotte thinks. Charlotte!
At CrowdStrike, we monitored millions of cyber events to detect threats and prevent breaches before they happen, to keep your business from becoming history. We stop cyber attacks. We stop breaches. We stop a lot of bad things from happening. CrowdStrike, protection that powers you.
You can't make this up, man. This is crazy. That this is also was a Super Bowl commercial, right? So it was imperative that I showed you that. So this is why you have stuff like this going on, because like I said, the infiltration is going to start with the inside. A lot of these people, the ones that's infiltrating the country, a lot of them, they have regular jobs, you know what I'm saying? Because they got to, in order to create this dynamic of an invasion, they got to blend in with society. Some of them are your co-workers that you work with. You have people who came from different countries out of nowhere. You working with them. You don't even know. You don't know them from a can of paint. But one thing you got to understand, you got to use your spiritual eye. Some of them are very clean cut, very fit. You know, some of them speak very well. You know what I'm saying? They carry themselves very well. And just pay attention to their whole demeanor. Just pay attention to, you know what I'm saying, like if they're being very private and things of that nature, right? Because it can be one of those things where it can be a sleeper cell.
Iranian national with terror ties was caught illegally crossing the U.S. northern border and remained in the country for 6 weeks before being removed. It comes as ICE reports 139 known or suspected terrorists were detained by the department in the last fiscal year. That number more than doubling
fiscal year 2022. Tom Feely is the former director of New York's ICE removals, and he joins us now. Tom, thank you for joining us today. So this arrest highlights what we all know, that there are bad guys, terrorists trying to get into our country. We also know that this is a highly volatile period of time in the world, with wars and people angry at us all over the place. So how worried are you that there could be terror cells forming right
Speaking of Iran, remember we killed the war general of Iran, Soleimani, and they was screaming death to America. It's going to be dark days for America, meaning that dark is also connected to the symbology of Revelation 8, when you have 1/3 of the stars, 1/3 of the sun smitten out, meaning that's the shutdown of the simulation by way of the power grid shutting down. So, like I said, it's going to be a manipulation due to an EMP, which is why the World Economic Forum said it's inevitable that it's going to happen.
now, and bad people coming in and potentially pulling off something very deadly?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. The southern border is more of the sexy border, if you will. It gets all the attention, it gets all the resources. And from a strategical point of view, if you look at Canada, Canada has some very liberal refugee and asylum policies that allow people to more easily gain access to Canada than the United States, so to speak. So a lot of people who want to come here and do harm to us actually come to Canada and then sneak across the northern border that just doesn't have that many resources. And I can't get into too much detail, obviously, but I can tell you the New York ports of entry see more nefarious people, probably, I think a lot more than people would probably suspect without, giving up too many secrets.
Yeah, that's so scary. And we know that there are record numbers of known terrorists that we've caught. We don't know how many are here that we haven't caught. We know there are hundreds of thousands of gotaways. Those are people that are trying to evade us and not turn themselves in to the Border Patrol. You also expressed concern that this individual, the specific individual that this man with links to terrorism that was caught, that he was not held longer for questioning.
Well, again, I don't really know the specifics of it, and we don't want to really get into what the processes are for ICE dealing with these individuals that come from foreign countries that have terroristic ties. The period does seem a little short. Hopefully, the intel agencies did get an opportunity to interview him and ascertain some more information. And like I've said before on Fox News, I know there's terrorist organizations and cells here. Unfortunately, I've had the opportunity to interview some of them, including Hamas. And it's just really concerning that with a wide open border, and I don't think any argument can be made that there isn't one, we have no idea who's coming in. People keep mentioning gotaways. How do you know you had 10,000 gotaways? Because you didn't catch them. So, is it a marble bowl? You're trying to guess how many are in there for a prize? They're here, and a scenario as simple could be, say you take 20 American cities, 5 terrorists in each city, which is very, very low number, and just say they decide to, do what they did in Israel, like Hamas did, just driving around neighbors and start shooting and killing innocent people. That would literally the wheels of American society would come off, and it would be absolutely devastating to us. And it's a real possibility.
Yeah, and they don't seem to care. They really don't seem to care. Whatever their policy is, whatever this borderless world they want to create, or collapsing our system through this illegal immigration, whatever it is, matters to them more, even than the politics of a possible terror attack. They are hell-bent on doing this. Last word on what you think should happen, or what can happen.
I really don't understand what the end game is with this administration. I mean, you can say it's kind of tongue in cheek. We're importing, Democrat voters, but in most places, everybody knows it's a constitutional issue. Illegal aliens can't vote or shouldn't be voting. And I really just don't know what the end game is. I mean, are you really trying to?
Yeah, you know what the end game is. Like I said, this is all. Understand that the media is a form of technology. The end game is infiltration. Infiltrating American soil, because American soil is being judged. The American people is going to be judged. So, like I said, that's going to, they have to create this false flag event in order to have this so-called New World Order system. So the next false flag event, the big event, is going to be, we're going to be infiltrated on American soil. And it's not just going to be subjected to a certain geographical landmass like what happened in 9/11 in the year 2001, right? It's actually going to be one of those things where it's going to be happening all over the place, right? It's not just going to be subjected to New York City. It's going to be happening in California, Indiana, Kentucky. It's going to be happening all over the place. That's why I said you have to be very meticulous about who you're around, because you don't know what's going to happen. You know what I'm saying? You're going to be infiltrated out of nowhere, just like the movie Red Dawn. They came outside, they was about to go to work, and then all of a sudden, some damn parachutes is coming from the sky. They didn't know what was going on. Thousands of troops, thousands of military men infiltrating American soil on parachutes.
The United States of America, because you couldn't have a bigger example of a Trojan horse than what we have going on right now.
I think you nailed it.
See, like I said, Trojan horse is the white horse. That's the white horse of Revelation. The Trojan horse conspiracy is acclimated to the prophetic divination of everything that's taking place right now. This is everything that's happening right now is all divine timing, right? It's esoterically connected to the blueprint of the so-called Bible, right? I'm gonna keep playing the video.
No other explanation. It just does not make sense. And I agree. This is much bigger than
Democrat voters, but in most places, everybody knows it's a constitutional issue. Illegal aliens can't vote or shouldn't be voting. And I really just don't know what the end game is. I mean, are you really trying to destroy the United States of America? Because you couldn't have a bigger example of a Trojan horse than what we have going on right now.
I think you nailed it. There's no other explanation. It just does not make sense. And I agree. This is much bigger than some, voting scheme to get more Democrat voters. It's much bigger. I think it's global. And I think we've already seen that whether it's the UN, these other countries that are participating, the WEF, the WHO, this is a globalist plot to do this. And the NGOs, we can't forget about that.
Is that what I said?
Tom Feely, thank you for joining us. Frightening, but important to be aware of what's happening.
Thanks for having me. Have a great new year.
Absolutely. You too. Happy New Year.
It's crazy that I said, because I ain't even watched this whole video. I just seen it. I ain't watched the last part of the video of everything that they just said, talking about the Trojan horse and the World Economic Forum and stuff. Like I said, everything that I was saying in the beginning of the video is basically what they said, right? Not a coincidence. So I'm gonna play this video also, because you got to understand. You got to understand the delineation of who the enemy is. You got to be able to use your spiritual fortitude, use your discernment, use your spiritual abilities, right? To understand what's going on, to find out who this deep state shadow government is. So I'm going to play this video that's going to be breaking down. It's an ex-CIA agent who used to work for the deep state. And I'm going to play the video.
Is where the attack is coming from, the really serious one. There are certain dark parts of our own government I call personally the shadow government. That's what we'll be talking about. Some call it the deep state, and the deep state does exist. What my point is, coming from the CIA, is the deep state and the shadow government are not the same thing. They're used interchangeably, but the shadow government and the deep state are not the same entity. They are joined together in a matrix, but they are not one and the same. And I'll explain how that is, why that is. And it's important to know that. They're both a threat to our Constitution. I come from the belly of the beast, the deep secret inner workings of the government that no one sees on the outside, the massive system of secrecy and the matrix of secret intelligence agencies that are now manipulating our elected officials behind the scenes. There's a serious threat to our democracy and our constitutional republic by the shadow government and its associated deep state. In a few years, we may no longer have a constitutional republic. Some people think that we already do not have a constitutional republic. And I, sadly, personally happen to be one of those, that the Constitution is over, except for those of us that still adhere to it as the supreme law of the land. The government has superseded that in a gross fashion. And we're going to talk about that in detail this evening. If you could please hold your questions till the end, and I will be available at the back table when we are done. I'll answer any questions that I can. I've met some of you personally that I've been talking with online, and some folks from previous speeches. So it's so good to have you here. And we're live streaming to a lot of folks. So welcome to everyone that's watching this tonight. We hope that will cause a bang. So, all right. I'm going to focus on the shadow government. The unconstitutional power of government secrecy. I call it the tyranny of secrecy. Our government has such a powerful, large matrix system of secrecy that it has literally taken over our elected government in a very complex fashion. They've been doing this for almost 60 years, and they've got it perfected. I always like to start my talks with this because it is so important. The Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. It's not a document of philosophy. It's not a written piece of ideology that's just a nice way for a country to do business or an ideology to follow. The Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. It supersedes the entire criminal justice system that we have underneath it. And that's important to understand because if someone violates the Constitution, they are breaking the law. It's a felony, okay? So if the government or any government agency violates the Constitution, like the Fourth Amendment, for example, they're breaking the law. That's a felony. That applies to citizens, and it applies to the government also. So if we remember that, we understand that, we're going to want to hold some people in Washington accountable for some of the things that are going on there. I mentioned that the shadow government and the deep state are two different entities, although they are joined together in this vast matrix that we see in Washington, D.C. and beyond. The deep state is the secret government, all of the secret intelligence agencies that are functioning in the dark behind the scenes. That is the shadow government. And it binds much of the deep state with secrecy, secret oaths, secrecy agreements, and other things that bind a lot of large contractors and others from saying anything about what they see. The deep state.
Which is why you have these secret societies, as I was saying. All these secret societies is basically your so-called deep state. And all these are the ones, these secret societies are the ones who control the Treasury. They control the Federal Reserve. They control all the religious sectors. When you're talking about monotheistic religion, they're connected to the Freemasonic order. These are basically comprised of your shadow government who control the deep state under democracy and liberalism, right? We'll go back to the video.
However, is the system, and you can see I put a $sign on system. The deep state is a system behind government. The military-industrial complex, I'll be talking about that. The currency of the shadow government is the power of secrecy, fear, and intimidation. That's the shadow government. I know because I was a part of that.
You notice he said fear. That is the embodiment of a draconian law. Draconian law is to extract fear within humanity, which is a form of animal magnetism to where you can control the population, right? With politics, with religion, with the military, with the police state, which is a form of a totalitarian society, right?
Intelligence officer, interviewer, and that's how it works. The currency of the deep state is money, power, and greed. So they're two different things. They're joined together, which I'll explain. But they're two different things that function with two different systems of control that are manipulating our government behind the scenes. Let's look at this. I want to show you all the size, the power, and the extent of the shadow government or the secret government. This is the size. Each organization that I'm about to show you up here functions in secrecy and is bound by secret oaths from saying anything about what they see. When I was in there, I was in there during the Iran-Contra scandal and some other things, and you cannot talk about anything that you see, even if it's illegal or unconstitutional, because there's a system to systematically destroy you if you do. So, you remember the Council on Foreign Relations, established in 1921, came largely from the banking elite, the Morgans, the Rothschilds, and others, formed the Council on Foreign Relations. Council on Foreign Relations, eventually with the same members of the CFR, created the CIA. I think 21 CIA directors have all been members of the Council on Foreign Relations. That is an unconstitutional organization, and it has been since its founding in 1921. I'll get into that. And I'm taking a library of information and research and trying to distill this down into as short as I can get it. So there's a lot of stuff here, but we'll try to keep it simple. The Council on Foreign Relations in the beginning and the CIA had a direct established contract with the mainstream media. Philip and Catherine Graham of the Washington Post were members of the Council on Foreign Relations and directly connected to the CIA and directly connected to the CIA and CFR's program of pumping information into the news media for propaganda of the American people. And do you think that still continues today? There's no doubt about it. I will prove it later on. Most people will say, that passed away in 1976 with the end of Operation Mockingbird. Operation Mockingbird did not end. A lot of you shaking your heads, you know what I'm talking about. It's still here. Mainstream media is involved directly. Then you've got, of course, our beloved NSA. I know a couple of senior NSA whistleblowers. We tend to be friends when you're doing what we do because it's a small circle of riskies. And they've got a lot of things to say about NSA domestic surveillance and spying. So the NSA was created not by Congress, but via executive order outside of the Constitution. Most people don't know. It's got the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or the FISA Court, which is a secret Supreme Court that functions outside of Congress and outside of the American people, and nobody knows what it does except grant warrants to domestically spy on U.S. citizens, which it has done in a gross fashion, as most of us know, with the NSA domestic surveillance program. More on that later. Silicon Valley now is directly connected to NSA. That's the way that the government does it. The CIA and the NSA, they approach Silicon Valley companies. And I was in a military industrial complex. I was a program manager. They are always looking for big multi-million-dollar contracts. That's how you survive. That's how you stay alive. So the NSA, the CIA comes to them and says, hey.
Mind you, I think Silicon Valley, I think their banking system foreclosed. I think it was either in 2022 or 2023, right? So it's not a coincidence that all this stuff that's connected to the deep state under democracy is actually acclimated to the fact that, you know, the Luciferian Great Reset is the shutting down of a certain economic system, right?
You got a $5-10 million contract. You sign up, we'll give this to you, and you can hook into Yahoo and Google and everybody else. And, it's worth, in this case, about $500 million total. So your average program managers, I'll take it. And they sign up. What the CIA and the NSA do then, because I executed thousands of these, they make you sign the piece of paper. Okay, you got this multi-million-dollar contract, but you cannot have access to anything until you sign the secrecy oath or the secrecy agreement with the CIA and NSA, which threatens you with administrative action, termination, or prison. If you mention anything connected with that operation, you can go to jail or worse. That's how they do it. Joint Special Operations Command is the president's, people don't know this exists, it's the president's private army. The president of the United States can send the secret JSOC out into any country, I think they're out there right now, into any country to conduct a special secret operation against that group of people to neutralize or whatever needs to be done in secret. That's the JSOC. The Director of National Intelligence, 17 federal agencies made up of tens of thousands of people are engaged in the shadow or secret government. 17 different intelligence agencies are part of the shadow government. It's massive. I'll show you the size here in a moment. Department of Homeland Security has its own secret branches. Department of State has its own secret branches. Do you remember when Secretary Hillary Clinton secretly ran guns into Libya, Benghazi, without anybody knowing about it, without Congress knowing about it? Those guns were given to the Free Syrian Army in Benghazi and eventually up outside of Syria. The Free Syrian Army, claiming to be moderate Islamic rebels, many of them morphed into, guess who? ISIS. ISIS is now using U.S. tanks, U.S. weapons, and trained U.S. fighters. Some of which, they got some of the weapons from Iraq when we bailed out of Iraq. But a lot of ISIS branched out of the Free Syrian Army, and they have a lot of our weapons that they're using that we sent over there. That was conducted in secret. Did anybody here vote for that? Did anybody here vote for arming the Free Syrian Army in Syria with weapons? I don't see any hands. I never do, because we didn't. We didn't even know what was going on. That is the shadow government. Defense Intelligence Agency, another branch of intelligence, were actually caught setting up a program to gain informants inside the United States to have U.S. citizens spy on other U.S. citizens. They were caught by Congress. The program was shut down. They were directly involved in the torture program, which was more than waterboarding, by the way. People died. It was a lot worse than just pouring water on people's heads. It was pretty bad. I think they're still under investigation for some of the things that they did to an extreme in the torture program. National Reconnaissance Office. All the satellites that are around the Earth, the spy satellites, the technology of which would blow your mind. So I'm just not going there. Let's just say that's another branch of the shadow government that's up there circulating around. And the technology that is out there, all the way down to nanotechnology, is mind-blowing. The National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, most people don't know this, but they approached Google and they assisted with a contract and paying a lot of money to help Google set up Google Earth. So, and we all know what Google Earth can. They can come down and see what kind of tomatoes I'm growing if they want to. So the NGA, do you think that the federal government has a hand in Google Earth and coming down and looking at your house and your barn? They helped create it. So is there any individual privacy anymore? It's gone. It's dead. What they can do is incredible. And it increases by the quarter. National Geospatial Intelligence, the FBI, warrantless search program, where they can break, Robert Mueller authorized this, where they can break into your house without a warrant, search your house, and leave without you ever knowing they were there. Gross violation of the Fourth Amendment. I'll try to keep this short, but Robert Mueller testified under oath, fabricated 3 times. They only broke into Americans' house 47 times. They came back and said, well, sir, we happen to have evidence that it was probably more like 2,000. Now he's under oath. Oh, okay, it was 2,000. Or, sir, we have evidence that it's even more than that. Well, they got him up to 4,000 times that they'd broken into Americans' homes without a warrant. Finally, when they got him above that, they said, Director Mueller, you're not being straight with us. How many times has the FBI broken into Americans' homes? If you can imagine, his response was this: I don't remember. Okay, do we buy that one? I don't think so. Under oath. We'll get into that a little bit later. So here we've got the shadow or secret government. I will get into the magnitude of this thing, the power of this thing, the unconstitutionality of this thing, and it is mind-blowing. That's just the shadow government. That's not the deep state. This is the deep state. The shadow government is connected to the deep state, and it binds much of it through secrecy oaths, secret contracts, and secret agreements that they are bound.
So this is why, like I said, you got to get this book right here. Screenshot it, Deep State by James B. Stewart. Talking about Donald Trump, the FBI, and the rule of law, right? I read this book about 5 years ago. So get this book because it's actually conducive to everything that's going on right now and conducive to everything that he's saying.
Life with, for example, Lockheed Martin and other companies have CIA contracts. They're bound by the secrecy oath. They can never talk about what they're doing. I'll talk about some of it because I got it from open source and I know how to do that. So, because I have to be real careful. I have to watch everything I say. This is the deep state. It does exist. There were some of us, a few of us that were talking about the deep state 5 years ago when it wasn't cool. And no one would say a thing about it. Now, if you listen to any talk show now, they're all talking about the deep state because it's kind of safe. Everybody's talking about the deep state, but they're claiming, well, they're Obama holdovers in the deep state, and that's really what it is. That's a smokescreen. The deep state and shadow government go back for every presidential administration going back to 1947. So it's not Obama holdovers, and I'll show you why in a moment. It is massive. The military... And
actually, I think it's further than that because I told you the foundation of democracy and liberalism in itself under the deep state shadow government or what's happening is all this stuff is traced all the way back to ancient Babylon. That's why I said it's actually longer than that.
Military-industrial complex. Eisenhower, when he gave that speech, originally called it the military-industrial congressional complex because Congress is tied in so deeply with the military-industrial complex, it's disgusting. But they convinced him to take Congress out of the military-industrial complex speech that he gave. Congress is very much involved in the military complex and the deep state, and you'll see in a moment why they promise us one thing and then they vote on something exactly the opposite. The lobbyists in Washington, D.C., I think spend $4.8 million a year lobbying the Congress and the Senate to get their way. We'll call it the MIC just for short. Wall Street directly connected to the deep state at the hip, and it is so connected to the trade.
So with that being said, you know, all this stuff, as far as the big event, is going to be activated by the deep state and the shadow government, which is comprised in the foundation of the democratic order under liberalism, right? So now, in order to, you know, survive this great awakening period, in order to survive the paradigm shift, you have to understand the diametrical difference between a false flag and something that's actually really taking place in real time. So how to spot a false flag? You have immediate national news coverage, political agenda, incident inspires intense emotion, initial media stories, conflict official story, no dead bodies, celebrities used to influence citizens. So this is why the great majority of the democratic order that is being controlled by the deep state shadow government, they always use celebrities to propagate democracy to so-called blacks, right? So it's not a coincidence because all this stuff is connected to the 14th Amendment, which is a fraudulent contract. Because when you participate in fraud, you can't claim injury to the system because fraud is acclimated to the deep state. Fraud is acclimated to the shadow government. Fraud is acclimated to liberalism. Fraud is acclimated to the democratic order, right? Democracy. Then you have the mainstream media manipulation tactics. Then you have the federal government attention, right? That's how you're able to use your discernment and decipher if it's a false flag or not, right? So there's a lot of things that's going to be taking place when you're talking about the big event. So I'm going to give a rundown for those coming in, right? I'm going to give a rundown. So this whole group, this Luciferian Great Reset is based on the international banking system and the food system starting to collapse, which creates a uncontrolled chaos where you get chaos and order, which is your personification of a new world order. So the white horse of Revelation 6 is actually the Trojan horse. The Trojan horse is based on the infiltration that's going to be activated by the deep state shadow government under democracy, right? Because this is why the great majority of the FEMA National Response Coordination Center, this is why Donald Trump, he signed the National Declaration of Emergency, because he knows that when FEMA is activated, that's when you activate martial law, because FEMA is authorized to identify, mobilize, and to provide discretion, equipment, resources necessary to alleviate the impacts of an emergency, right? So like I said, it's not a coincidence that Donald Trump signed the National Emergencies Act that basically gives authorization to the president to declare a national emergency. And that national emergency is due to the expansion of borders from the Democrats letting all these immigrants coming in, right? Where you're going to get your so-called invasion. That is your so-called Trojan horse, right? So you got FEMA camps in America for the unprepared, because those who are not prepared, those who are not self-sufficient enough to have the resources to combat, the implications of the deep state in these false flag events, those are the ones that's going to be stuck in FEMA camps, right? So it's not a coincidence that the House of Intelligence Community of the Chairman Turner, he stated that there is a serious national security threat, right? Which is going to be the symbology of a invasion. So it's not a coincidence that the United States Capitol, they have a flag that's flying upside down, because the symbology of an upside down flag is a flag code that basically signifies civil unrest, which is your personification of distress, of an extreme danger of life or property, and on the geographical landmass of America. Then this is where you get a multitude of false flag events due to the national threats, whether it's a nuclear strike, alien invasion, when you're talking about Project Bluebeam, immigrant invasion, which is taking place right now with the expansion of borders. Then you have the United Nations military factions, mass shootings, stadium, arena explosives. So it's imperative to understand what time we're living in. You can't go to every party. You can't go to every football game, basketball game, while being oblivious to what's taking place on the planet. You have to have your mind very focused. You have to be a very focused individual in order to deviate through this great awakening period. Because, if you try to put old wine in new bottles, you're gonna get lost in the sauce. So with that being said, you got concert attacks, cyber attacks, weather modification, chemical attack. So they need a false flag. They need a false flag. They need a big event. They need a big event to take place so where they have civil unrest, martial law, economic collapse, to implement a food shortage, a digital currency system, to activate civil war and a world war, right? And all this stuff is basically the foundation of anarchy when you have all these things that's taking place on the geographical landmass of America. Now, what is anarchy? Anarchy is the absence of government, right? Which is basically the personification of the utopian society of individuals who enjoy freedom without the government, a stateless society, a political disorder due to the absence of governmental authority, right? Well, so it's not a coincidence that the symbol of the anarchy symbol is synonymous to the Antichrist symbol, which is synonymous to the solar eclipses alignments on the geographical landmasses of America. So when you look at the word anarchy, when you look at the gematria code for it, anarchy, the gematria code is 824, which is also connected to 2024 of April 8th, 2024. So when you cross out April, you just look at 8 and you cross out the 20. You look at 824, the gematria code for anarchy of the solar eclipses is 824, which is why when you look at the geographical landmass of America, when you talk about the solar eclipses, it looks like the anarchy symbol, and it's also the sigil for the Antichrist. One thing you got to understand when you understand symbolism, symbolism is a language. Just like in the English language, you have words that have double and triple meanings. So the same thing takes place when you're talking about symbolism, right? Malachi, be quiet. So the same thing actually takes place when you're talking about symbolism, right? So all this stuff, all these false flag events, in my opinion, I think is going to start around March 25th, because according to Revelations 12:12, that is basically the symbology of the fact that Lucifer has a short time period on this planet, right? So it tells you right here at the bottom, March 25th, 2024, because the great majority of these false flag events, these black swan events from 2020 to 2024 all happened in the month of March. When you talk about the Federal Reserve began in March of 2020 being absorbed by the United States Treasury, then you had the draconian juice, then you had lockdowns, all that stuff happened in the month of March. So what's taking place right now, as we segue into the Great Awakening period in the age of Aquarius, right? This is going to be the part 2 to implement a big event to create a new world order system. So they got to create a Luciferian Great Reset, right? Because they know that their time is up, right? And this is all connected to the foundation of democracy. You got to understand the etymological roots of certain words in order to understand what's taking place. The word democracy, right? Demon, crossi, shortcut for democracy. All demons and rogues, they gather together. A rogue is a faction of entities, which is comprised of secret societies. That's what basically makes up your shadow government. Your shadow government is the foundation of democracy. The deep state is the foundation of democracy. It's kind of like the whole aspect when you look at understand Freemasonry. You got the York Rite and the Scottish Rite. Shadow government, deep state that is being controls democracy, because democracy is actually demonic rulership under draconian law, right? So it's not a coincidence that all these false flag events is going to be orchestrated by democracy, because there's no such thing as democracy, because democracy in itself is a form of a demonstrative government, a de facto government to implement fraud amongst the American people. So this is where you got the great majority of the deep state shadow government who control the IMF, the world banking systems, and things of that nature. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that is basically comprised of everything that's taking place. So that's why you got to be very meticulous about everything that's taking place on the planet right now. You can't be so oblivious, you know what I'm saying? You can't be so oblivious to everything that's taking place. You know, because we at the meat and potatoes, we on the last leg of this system. We're really going through the 7-year tribulation period. So this is all based on prophetic divination, right? All this is prophetic divination because it's going to segue into something else when you're talking about a cybernetic dictatorship, when you're talking about a new world order system. So they got to create a catastrophic event. They got to create a big event through a Luciferian great reset, right? So this is why you have to be very self-sufficient in these times, right? You got to have your resources in order. Talk to your family members. You know what I'm saying? Get some like-minded people around to where y'all can use, be resourceful to each other. You know what I'm saying? You can't put all your eggs in one basket. You know what I'm saying? You can't be one of those people who are just one-dimensional minded so much to the point where you negate reality. All this stuff that's taking place when you're talking about the expansion of borders, a cybernetic dictatorship, an economic crash, EMP attack, the electrical grid going down, all these things are basically a reality. But like I said, you have to use your discernment and your spiritual eye to see beyond the bullshit, right? You got to see beyond everything that's actually taking place. So this video was one of those things where it's showing people the dichotomy between good and evil. Because like I said, as we're going through a great awakening period, as they're trying to create a Luciferian great reset, you got to pick a side. So this is where you're going to have a dimensional split. You're going to have the chosen ones over here, and you're going to have those who propagate the system over here, right? Hold on for a second, I gotta sneeze. So there's going to be a dimensional split that's going to be taking place. A dimensional split. Those who are trying to deviate from the system, the chosen ones, and those who conform and propagate the system that's being facilitated by the deep state shadow government under democracy and liberalism, right? So that's, like I said, it's very imperative to understand the art of detachment. You got to detach from people who are acclimated to the system. You got to detach from friends and family members who want to go along to get along with the system, because the system in itself is going to subjugate you so much to the point where you're going to be in alignment with the depopulation agenda. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, get this book in order to understand everything intuitively, right? It's going to tell you the inner workings of the deep state shadow government, how it's connected to democracy, and how they want to castigate the matriarch, basically, because the matriarch is the foundation of a republic. So one thing you got to understand as a so-called Black person, one thing they used as a weapon from the deep state shadow government under democracy, one of the weapons that they used was civil rights, because civil rights is not connected to the Declaration of Human Rights. The Declaration of Human Rights is what connects you to the Indigenous People Act, that connects you right back to a republic, which is the matriarch under natural law, right? So that's the diametrical difference between the Declaration of Human Rights and civil rights. Civil rights is under the de facto corporation, right? It's under the de facto corporation that makes you a corporate war entity to the system. So everything that comes from the deep state, everything that comes from democracy actually goes against natural order. It goes against everything. That's why everything that's being propagated by democracy is actually backwards, right? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, as I told you before, spirituality is all about having the mental and the spiritual fortitude to not be tricked by things that's going to be propagated by apostocracy, right? You got to look at things from a supreme spiritual eye. You got to see beyond the bullshit. So with that being said, thanks for watching this video. End of transmission.
10:14. We will put an end to this madness.
It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. Karma's gonna get to you, and then you'll have a chariot with only one less friend. Now I had distant folks that are looking to my eyes to understand the wisdom he's given and his wealth from the skies. So thanks for this meal that I'm about to receive, and thank you for my health and all the good memories. Thanks for the courage taking on another day. When I used to not believe, but now I know about grace. Stay away from the fire, cause the flames does burn. Go with your gut feeling. When it's wrong, you learn. For every one step I take, the Lord takes two. And do unto others if you want it done unto you. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. This a completion, the selfish proto-Grecian, Amerindian, Phoenician. I'm the last of the Mohicans, the bastard of the land, the pen, melanin, accretion. And we just trying to get back to the fact that we was kings and queens of a land before the avalanche seized it. I live on Turtle Island with the rest of the diseased. Better than the medicine for 7 different treatments. Niggas try to ride away but end up getting seasick. The sleep can feel my words like Braille and they're awakened with the penmanship of Hindu script written in them vacant monastery honorary payments to the prototype. Tomorrow's only a day away, but nothing happens overnight. The fuck's wrong with going left when you know it's right? Biting off more than I can chew, that's an overbite. Black on black crime is like watching 2 soldiers fight when all along they was on the same page. History. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land. It's me again, God. I know it's been a long time since I last called you back on your line. So I hope and I pray for your hand to help me on the ladder to the land.